Carrie Harrison with you, and it's always exciting when we get to look into the future, often months, years into the future. It's worth every moment of time spent. Daniel Estulin, our lead horse, our superstar in this arena, is doing a webinar called Transhumanism, where he takes us into things to come. And Daniel, tell us about it.
Any counter-revolution here is only worth something if it basically knows how to defend itself. So what we're seeing in the United States, the dictatorship of the financial bourgeois, let's call it, which has literally subjugated the media and the information technology sector under its control. And since modern society is digitalized, the dictatorship is unfolding in the digital sphere, completely dismantling real life. The religion of American democracy spawned the Inquisition, whose hatred was ignited on the internet, but the consequences are felt in real life. We can talk about digital dictatorship. Now, this slogan is now inscribed on the banners of the counter-revolutionary liberal crusaders, only that the demand for the financial reform from the time of the French Revolution in the 19th century has now been transformed into a demand from the world government and the transfer of all the state power to a small group of representatives. Let's call it the largest transnational financial corporations in the world. That said, Trump supporters in the United States, as well as many foreign observers, rightly point out that the left liberal coup that brought Biden's team to power in the United States is not the end of the struggle of right-wing conservative industrial capital with the left liberal transnational oligarchic financial capital, but rather the beginning. This is true not only in the United States. This struggle will, I guess, define the face of the world over the next couple or maybe a couple of decades. Just as after 1945, the struggle between two vastly different, let's call it visions of the world, determined by the confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union, or the Soviet and the American systems of government. And again, as in the period between the 1940s and 1960s, the United States is not only a political and economic rival for Russia and China, as it was between 1991, the collapse of the Soviet Union, in 2021, but also an ideological adversary. Russia and China, the flagships of conservatives and also traditionalism, building their power on the real sector of the economy, which is industry and agriculture, as well as a strong state. In other words, a bureaucratic republic, a state of law dominated by, you could call it, administrative apparatus that ensures the uniform application of the law throughout its territory in relation to, we can call it social groups. Before Donald Trump, the United States was a stronghold of a financial transnational oligarchy, ideologically based on left liberal populism, with its theory of tolerance and dictatorship of minorities, and also a reduction in the role of the state, which turns out to be unable to ensure uniform application of the law throughout its territory in relation to all social groups. And again, we see the result of it in today's failed policy, both national and international. In other words, some can set fire to houses, shops, police stations, rob and kill civilians, while others cannot even express dissatisfaction on social networks or in the media, and if they do lose their jobs and at times their lives. Now, Trump has tried unsuccessfully to combat these trends, and after Trump, Biden's team is going to run all of it back and even strengthen the terrorist dictatorship of minorities, destroying, the American state, and also creating it in the place of free hunting zones against all who think differently, obviously falling back to the financial oligarchy who run Joe Biden. Naturally, tens of millions of yesterday's supporters of Donald Trump cannot come to terms with a situation in which they suddenly find themselves in their own country, not even third-class citizens, but simply undesirable element, the deplorables, as Clinton used to call them, would need to be eradicated. Many of them want to resist, are ready to resist, including for violent actions, need a leader, and are trying to understand whether Trump wants or can become such a leader. Now, and with this I finish, opponents of leftist oligarchic liberalism in the rest of the world are also not without interest following the further fate, not so much of Trump, as of what has come to be called Trumpism in recent years. In other words, the American right-wing conservative resistance. And it depends on how active and successful it will be, whether it'll be possible to, to bide the Bidenites or whatever you call them with internal American problems and then use it as, I guess, as an impulse to propel this ideology towards the rest of the world. That's one of the reasons why Russian President Putin has such high rating, because he is the epitome of conservative values and is very much respected by the rest of the world.
You know, it's interesting, Daniel Estulin, because we look at recent times, you talk about digital dictatorship, and most people, especially here in the US, that are in lockdown, so to speak, one way or the other, do rely on the internet, do rely on apps like formerly known as Parler, Facebook, Twitter, etc., to be able to communicate, to be able to organize, to be able to rally. And this is the first time a president has been pulled off of all platforms, and a communication platform app has been completely destroyed and expunged. Meanwhile, everybody else is still on Facebook, still on Twitter, still doing their thing. It begs the question, what do you see next?
Well, again, we talked about Trump launching his new party, whatever he calls it, the Patriot Party, the Patriotic Party, the new Tea Party. It doesn't matter the name. The main effect or the effort will have to be spent on the pacification of American provocations aimed at expanding the sphere of influence of transnational financial capital based on the political support of the left oligarchic liberal parties. Without that, it doesn't matter what you do. You can't win the battle. You can't win the war. Now, Trump has allegedly discussed within his narrow circle the prospects for the creation of this patriotic party under his leadership. From this, some Americans and also foreign experts concluded that Trump, ousted by the left liberal pushists, did not intend to surrender and would try to lead the resistance. Again, is that true? I have my doubts. First of all, Trump is indeed supported by most of the Republican voters. That said, much of the party establishment, needless to say, wants him gone forever, which is a difference between the people, the deplorables, and the party apparatus, which is in bed with the liberal banking financiers globally. So if Trump leaves the party personally, initiating its split, it is unclear how many voters will leave with him. In any case, a part will remain. I know Trump got 75 million or 80 million or whatever he got. In the end, part will stay with the Republican Party. So an attempt to create a new party will weaken an anti-oligarchic, right-wing, conservative forces, both within the Republican Party, from which the most radical part of the activists, needless to say, will leave with Trump, and in the United States as a whole. Because again, you have to understand that the people voted is not a given that they're going to go with him. Some will go, others will stay. So does this mean that the idea of creating a new party is a bad idea? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It's just that the initiative to break up the Republican Party, and it is, we are talking about a split, should come not from the Trumpist majority, but from left liberal underground in its establishment. Then the blame will fall on them. In other words, the traitorous Republicans, and perhaps it'll even be more possible to simply get rid of them, kicking them out of the party, not creating a new party. This is also a solution. Now, if the leftists carry out a Republican Party coup, then the conservatives will be forced to create a new political force, the first task of which will be the political funeral of the Republican Party itself as a competitor claiming part of the electoral field. And only then the fight against the Bidenite dictatorship. Secondly, with Trump's departure from the White House, the threat of impeachment has not escaped Trump. Democrats may try to bring it to completion precisely in order to block the political activity of the ousted president. I don't know the laws of the United States. I have no idea if Trump is impeached, if he can run for president. I don't know. I have no idea. But an attempt by a part of the Republicans to exchange Trump's impeachment for Biden's counter-impeachment is unlikely to succeed. We're seeing it right now. So the left liberal majority is blocking Biden's impeachment, if not at the level of discussion, then at the maximum at the level of voting in the House of Representatives, where they enjoy a majority. So for Trump, everything doesn't look so good, since during the coup, the Bidenites seized not only the White House, but also the control of the Senate. Of course, there's a problem of getting 2/3 of the senatorial votes, but, as practice shows, leftists do not shy away from any pressure, and Republicans are far from fully ready to die for Trump. So the second attempt at impeachment may turn out to be more dangerous than the first. Is that bad for those who follow Trump? Actually, I think it may be a blessing in disguise. If the impeachment succeeds, Kerry, then there will be no more talk of any political activity. Trump, from what I understand, but again, I'm not an expert in American law, will not be able to run for president. But, or moreover, if the impeachment is successful, criminal charges can and most likely will be brought against them. Now, as a practice, if you're talking about, convicting members of Trump's campaign headquarters in 2016 shows, we can look at a Trump conviction, put him away for 15, 20 years, which in his case is life imprisonment. So if the Bidenites who seized power feel threatened by Trump, they will try to follow this path. Thirdly, in recent days, they laughed a lot of the Biden mummy that was brought into the White House. Biden is 8 years old. He has dementia. There's no doubt about it. Now, Trump is 74. He turned 75, I think, in June or July. And 4 years from now, he will be 78. Again, he can, even if he's not impeached, he can theoretically run for office. Again, he'll be 78, the same age as Biden today, approaching his 79th birthday. That is, conservatives today should be thinking about whether Trump, if he remains their leader, will be able to fulfill his leadership functions in 4 years. Meanwhile, it is clear that by the time that struggle between the conservatives and the leftists will be in full swing, and the possible age-related weakness of their leader, in other words, Trump, can become a critical vulnerability for the entire movement. Because again, if you look at Biden, the media just basically ignored him. Biden has dementia. What dementia? He looks absolutely fit as a fiddle. So as we can see, there are at least three arguments against the long-term bet of the conservative opposition on Trump. Inter-party, first of all, legal, possible impeachment, and also age. Now, does this mean that Trumpists should not bet on Trump now? No, it doesn't. Actually, quite the opposite. They should. They don't have anyone else today. However, regardless of his personal merits and desire, if he has, any desire to continue fighting, to continue, this trying to get back or run back the presidency, which he feels was stolen from him this year. Okay, and again, it can't be relied on. Trump may refuse to resist under guarantees, for example, of personal safety. We don't know that. We don't have access to that kind of information. Trumpists cannot rely on Trump as the only presidential candidate, regardless of whether they will continue to work within GOP or create a new patriotic party. So they need to find, I guess you call it a Trump substitute. In other words, a relatively young or younger, more radical ally than Trump himself, and quickly promote him, putting him on par with Donald Trump. So if Trump makes it to the next election in good health, this new Trump will go with him as vice president. And if something happens with Trump, he will be nominated as a presidential candidate. So if it is necessary to look for such a person amongst the radical left, I repeat, the radical left, not the moderate, the radical, without being ashamed of their radicalism. If necessary, you can hide, a too radical rhetoric, but ideologically and internally, this person should be ready to take a much more radical position than Trump himself. And everyone should know it on both sides of the aisle. And this will deter the leftists from too harsh attack on Donald Trump so as not to release this tougher, younger, hungrier successor to the fore, while the Trumpists will pull up the far right, because they will pull up the far right. So the right should not be ashamed, again, of an alliance with an extreme right. I'm not talking about Ku Klux Klan, okay? Because no matter who this new party chooses as its candidate, they will be labeled extremists anyway. Okay, if you're for God, for flag, and for country, in other words, you are an extremist. In addition, the leftists have long concluded an alliance with left-wing radicals and use their militants for their own purpose. And we see it with Black Lives Matter, we see it with Antifa, et cetera, et cetera. We saw it in the 60s, with Weatherman Underground, including all these organizing terror events against their political opponents. So again, summarizing, the Trumpists are faced with the task of not being nostalgic, let's say, for Trump, but together with him, or even in spite of him, strengthening their position in the political center, ousting the leftists from there and trying to marginalize them on the extreme left flank, as well as expand to the right, to the possible limits, excluding absolute extremists, obviously. So the main thing, again, is to expand the line of leaders so that next time, if they manage to come anywhere near power, which is a big if, their president doesn't depend on the old party establishment. One of the reasons why he lost the elections, because he tried to play within the rules against the people who made the rules, but can rely on a stronger and more powerful team of like-minded, radical, quote-unquote, people.
What a great way to set the stage, Daniel Estulin, for the upcoming webinar. As always, it's a perfect time to pivot into what transhumanism is. And just to use as a catalyst to get there, the recent siege on the Capitol is going to invite Patriot Act 2. We know it's going to happen. Serious surveillance. It was already bad enough. It's going to be absolutely ubiquitous now. The worst case scenario, and it'll all be digital. So transhumanism, us, you, me, all of us, the webinar, tell us what we can expect.
Well, again, today I think was the beginning, the opening salvo of World Economic Forum in Davos. It's online, so basically, the attendees can spare $43 or say $43, which is what the price of a hot dog costs in Davos for the rich and famous.
That's true.
Xi Jinping made a speech this morning. Putin, I'm not sure when he's due. I think he's up today or tomorrow. But in any case, Davos is reset. Klaus Schwab, the ideologue of World Economic Forum back in the 1970s, this is the man who wrote a book on the reset. This is the Bible, just as I wrote the Bible on the Bilderberg Group. This is the man who wrote the Bible on what's coming up. And what's coming up, we've talked about this before, but now it's a time to explain to people from a vantage point of what these people openly tell us they're going to do. Whereas before it's a conspiracy theory. They're not planning to do this. Are you wearing your aluminum foil hat? Now it's all out in the open. They're telling you it's an open text exactly what they're planning to do. And what they're planning to do via COVID as an excuse is a change towards a sixth technological paradigm. We've gone from the industrial economy to post-industrial economy. Let's call it post-industrial 5.0. Now we're going to the trans-industrial. And the problem with the trans-industrial economy for us humans, there's no place for us in this world of artificial intelligence, of robotics, of virtual learning, of distance learning. All that stuff is out there. This is the new world that we're coming into. And the problem for the elite is, what are we going to do, with 7 billion people that have absolutely nothing to do? Because you can only pay universal basic income for so many months before you simply run out of money, or they're planning to print quadrillion million dollars for God knows how many more years to come, which means that the way things stand right now, over the next 6 months or so, we will see a total collapse of the global economy, very much in line with what happened in 1929. And with Biden, this acceleration is going to be faster, okay, than it would have been with Trump. Trump didn't have an idea of what to do either, but at least with Trump, the collapse or the drawdown or the downfall would have been maybe 10, 15%, and with Biden it's going to be 50, 60. So it's absolutely unavoidable. So they needless to say, transhumanism needs control of society. Then use this concentration camp without tears, because again, the problem is that you and I and everyone else, human beings, we have this intrinsic need to eat 3 times a day. Maybe twice, maybe once, but we need to eat. Robots don't. So the problem for the elite is what to do with all those people who have nothing to do, no jobs, no future to look forward to. And this is what we're seeing in Russia right now. We're also seeing it in the United States. We're also seeing it in Europe. We're seeing it in Latin America. The other day, what happened with Navalny, who has less than 1% approval rate in Russia. There were some great comments from people on Twitter saying if the American media is supporting Navalny, it means this guy's got to be the biggest piece of crud in the world. That's not the word that they use. That's the word I'm using, okay? So, in other words, these people understand. So why are they doing it? Because the problem globally, and if you look at the people that came out in Russia, and if you look at the people that protested in the United States, and if you look at the people who protest in Spain, in England, in France, and in Germany, in what was it, in Eindhoven the other day, on the Amsterdam, I can't remember, in the Netherlands, they burned the city down because they're so sick and tired of being locked up. But the problem is that for these people, they're saying, you, talking about our parents, you had a place, okay? You had a job, you have savings, you have a bank account, you have a stable lifestyle. We don't belong in this world. We have nothing. We have no place of our own. We have no jobs. We have no future. We have no education. We have nothing to look forward to. And we, as collective humanity, the youth, the 20, 30-year-olds, we are willing to destroy the entire world, burn it to the ground, and then see what happens. And if somebody gives me a sign that says Putin dictator, or Trump dictator, or Biden dictator, or whoever dictator, I'm going to put it up if it helps me burn the entire system down. And this is what they're faced with globally. It's not only the question of Putin is bad or this guy is good. It's a question that as society, We've come to the limit of growth. And that means that this change we're seeing right now, which the leader implementing, this change toward the sixth techno paradigm, this world towards transhumanism, post-humanism, man-machine, cyborgs, etc., combined with a reset, will bring us into a world we could never have imagined 10 or 15 years ago, even 2 years ago, in 2019. And if people who today, are thinking that, as soon as they get their vaccine, as soon they'll be out of the woods, and we're going to get back to the world of yesteryears, to 2019, and things are going to get back to normal. Things are never going to get back to normal. We are in a new world. And if people keep trying to play with the rules, with the background, the rules before the COVID crisis, they can never get out of this alive. And this is what we're going to be talking about in our webinar. We're going to be giving people the tools to survive, to understand what's coming, to show them how this is being put together, to show how this massive transfer of wealth, from the Main Street to Wall Street is being orchestrated behind the scenes, and why, unless we rise up and actually willing to stand and say, I want to be counted, we have no future as humanity.
Help yourself. You can also help others simply by attending this webinar and walking away with the tools you've wanted for many years. A chance to look into the future, understand where it's going, and not be a victim of how it falls out. That's, of course, February 11th with Daniel Estulin at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. That's New York time. Make sure you check out this webinar. You will not regret a minute, and you'll get a week's free replay after the fact. Daniel Estulin, thank you so much for giving us a little teaser on what's to come, and we look forward to seeing you in that webinar.
Thank you, Gary. Take care.